Hello again and welcome to another Mordian Glory Konflikt 47 video. Today's episode is going to be a beginner's guide aimed at helping you get to grips with the game of Konflikt 47. I'm going to take you through the basics of order dice and rift dice, movement, shooting and combat, as well as touching upon terrain. And that's it! So without further ado, let's dive right into this. The first thing that I want to cover are the special dice that are used in a game of Konflikt 47. These are the rift dice and the order dice. Starting off, we have the order dice. These are a D6 dice, and that means there are 6 different orders that you can give to your units. Each one of these orders represents what your unit is trying to do on the battlefield. For example, if I tell my unit to do a run order, then they will move as fast as possible, but they won't do any shooting. Run orders are also how you get into close combat. Running can either be used to move from point A to point B, or it can essentially be used as a charge order to get into melee combat. The advance order allows your unit to move a short distance and also fire its weapons. The fire order means that your unit will stay still and shoot their weapons. If you're wondering what the difference between an advance and a fire order is, if you stay still and shoot your weapons, you're more accurate. If you move and shoot your weapons, then you are less likely to hit and you will incur a to hit penalty. The ambush order means that your unit will not move or shoot right away, but rather you can essentially use this to shoot later in the turn in response to one of your opponent's units moving into line of sight. So for example, I might have a unit of Style Troopmen that can't see anything right now, and even if they move, they wouldn't be able to see anything either. So what I do is I put them into ambush. Later in the turn, if my opponent decides to jump some fireflies into my line of sight, I can then change that ambush to a fire, and my unit is then allowed to fire at the enemy. If you're familiar with Warhammer 40k, it's very similar to Overwatch. The down order means that my unit does not move, it does not shoot, but instead it gets down, it hugs the dirt. The advantage of the down order is that it gives you +2 to your cover save. So for example, if you're in some soft cover, you would go from having a 5+ cover save to having a 3+ cover save. If you're in hard cover, it would mean you'd go from a 4+ cover save to a 2+ cover save, making your guys very difficult to dig out of cover. However, it is important to note that sometimes down orders are involuntary. If you have a unit that is coming under a lot of fire, it may go down whether you want it to or not. So it both represents your men voluntarily hitting the dirt and trying to stay alive. It also represents your men maybe panicking in the face of some pretty serious firepower. Finally, we have the rally order. Rallies are used to get your men back into the fight and to remove all of the pin markers that they have accumulated up until that point in the game. Rallies can be an incredibly powerful order when used correctly, but it does mean that your unit won't be doing anything else that turn. It's important to understand that every single unit in Konflikt 47 uses the same order dice. You do not need special order dice for Style Troopmen, or special order dice for Fireflies, or special order dice for vehicles and walkers. Every single unit in the game uses the same 6 orders. Next up, we have rift dice. These are also a special D6, and they have 3 options on them, so they don't have quite as many options as a order dice. You've got 1 surging symbol, you've got 2 active symbols, and then you have got 3 exhausted sides. What the rift dice essentially represent is the amount of rift energy that is coursing through your unit at any given time. And the more rift energy you have available, the better. A surging rift dice is the best result, and a blank exhausted rift dice is the worst result, essentially showing that the unit has run out of rift energy temporarily. But the big question is, what do the rift dice allow you to do in the game? They are the resource which allows you to trigger abilities that your unit may have. So for example, if I have a unit of Style Troopmen and I want to activate their Vormarch ability, I need a Rift Dice that is either surging or it is active. If I have a Rift Dice which is exhausted, then I simply cannot activate their Vormarch ability. Typically, Rift Dice will start with a Rift unit on active. Once you activate their ability, for example, Vormarch, you would then carry out the order and then you would turn it to exhausted. If you have a surging Rift Dice, then this can be used in two different ways. You can either activate a Rift unit's normal Rift ability. If you do that, then it will go from surging to active. And then later on in the game, if you use it again, it will go from active to exhausted. Or sometimes units will have a particularly potent Rift ability, which might mean it takes a surging Rift Dice down to an exhausted one. A good example of this is the Vogelspinner with the Maschinengewehr gravity weapon. You can use the Maschinengewehr to do a gravity pulse. This essentially is a powerful ranged weapon attack. Now the gravity pulse can be activated on an active Rift Dice. And so you go, okay, I'm going to go from active down to exhausted, do my gravity pulse, no problem whatsoever. Or you can actually overload the gravity pulse. And if you do that, then you go from, and you need to have a surging dice to do that. And if you do it, then you'll go from surging down to exhausted, but the weapon will be even more potent. However, you don't need to use that surging Rift Dice and overload the weapon. You could simply go, okay, we'll go for a standard Rift Pulse, a standard gravity pulse, okay, surging down to active, later on, do it again, down to exhausted. So it's really important to sort of get a feel for how these Rift Dice work and what kind of capabilities you want to unleash. It is important to note that not every unit has a surging ability. Sometimes it'll just have an active one, and having a surging dice is simply just a way of getting that double resource, as it were. And also it's important to note that not every unit in the game gets a Rift Dice. Every unit gets an order dice, because that's how you actually do things on the board with them. Like, if you do fire, then every unit needs to be able to fire and move and shoot and everything. But not every unit is going to have a Rift Dice. Think about it. If you've got a standard unit of blokes, basic riflemen, there's no fancy technology in there whatsoever, they're not going to have a Rift ability. But some kind of crazy gravity weapon, some kind of mad power armor troops, they're probably going to have a Rift Dice and a Rift ability. Now, how these two dice interact is important to note as well. So the Rift Dice doesn't let you do an order or anything like that. You need to use the order dice first, which will then typically trigger the Rift ability. So for example, if I wanted to fire the gravity pulse from the Maschinengewehr, I would do a fire order, and then if I had my active Rift Dice, I would then go and exhaust it, and those would work together. But I can't, for example, just have the Rift Dice here and then go, okay, I'm going to activate that and do the gravity pulse. This is essentially the resource, but this is how you activate the unit. It is important to note that some units do not require an order for their Rift ability, but those are more the exception than the rule. And for today's beginner purposes, we'll just stick with the idea that order dice start making the units do stuff. Rift Dice are essentially your resource. One last thing to mention about order dice and Rift Dice is each unit only gets one order dice associated with it, but a unit can potentially have more than one Rift Dice. Some units will have none, some units will have one, some units may have two or even three. To find out how many Rift Dice a unit has, it's best to check its unit entry in the relevant army list. All units have their rules available for free on Konflikt47.com under the Army List section. So we have a rough idea of what order dice do and what Rift Dice do, but how do they actually interact and how do they actually work in a game of Konflikt 47? Well, let's move on to our next segment of the video and we'll find out. Every single game of Konflikt 47 uses a dice bag. Now, I have an official Konflikt 47 one here, but you don't have to use one like this. You can use a bolt action one if you want, for example, or you can even use an old sock. But bear in mind, you are going to be reaching inside this thing, so you might not want to reach inside your mate's moldy old socks. At the beginning of each game of Konflikt 47, you're going to take the order dice for each unit in both players' armies, and you're going to put them into the dice bag. You're then, to get the turn going to give the dice bag a good shake and pick a dice out. This is why it's very important to have two different colours of dice, because each colour is going to correspond to a player and their units. So for example, I've got grey for the Germans and green for the Americans. So as I have drawn a grey dice out, this means that I can activate one of my units. Now, I don't have to activate a specific unit. This is not like this has like order dice 1 and this is order dice 2. I can pull an order dice out and then I can use it how I want. Maybe I want to activate my Star Troop in first one turn, but maybe later on in the game, I might want to activate my Vogel Spinner. So we activate a unit. Once that's done its activation, we then draw another dice out. And oh look, now we've got an American one. And you keep doing this, and you keep doing the various orders like advance and run and rally and stuff until all the dice in the bag have been drawn out. When the bag is empty, that basically represents the end of the turn. Every unit at that point will have activated, it will have done something, and so at the end of the first turn, you take the dice and you put them back in the bag. That would have been turn 1, and then you go again. First dice this time again is the Germans. Lucky to get the first dice both times. This time I'll go for my Vogel Spinner. And you continue this process throughout the game, completing turns by using all of the available dice in the dice bag until you get to the typically end of turn number 6. Most bolt action missions and Konflikt 47 missions are 6 turns, but sometimes they can be a little bit longer. Some of you may be wondering, but what happens if one of my units is destroyed? Let's say, for example, at some point in the game, my Vogel Spinner is knocked out. When that happens, its dice at the end of the turn does not go back in the bag. Instead, it essentially gets removed from the game, along with any rift dice it also would have had. Then, at the end of the turn, you would put any surviving units, order dice, back into the bag, and you continue that process. Therefore, over the course of the game, in theory, less and less dice should be going back into the dice bag each time, as units are knocked out, destroyed, or routed from the battlefield. Alright, so that's how we use the order dice throughout the course of the game. But what about these rift dice? At the start of the game, each rift unit begins with its rift dice on the board. So, for example, all these order dice would be in the bag at the start of the game, but all of these rift dice would be with their units. They essentially start with a bit of juice in the tank. Then, let's say over the course of turn 1, we used the rift dice on our Vogel Spinner and on the Fireflies, and we had activated all of our units. Like that, okay? At the end of the turn, you look at each unit that has an exhausted rift dice for both sides, and each player takes it in turn to roll those dice. So for example, we've rolled an active one with the Vogel Spinner. If you roll an active or a surging result, then that dice can immediately, at that point, before you start the next turn, be assigned to a unit that doesn't currently have one. However, let's say with our Americans, we roll an exhausted dice. That does not get assigned to the Fireflies. Instead, that actually goes in the dice bag at the end of the turn, along with the order dice in preparation for your next turn. So for example, that would happen at the end of turn 1. And now we've got a rift dice in here going into turn 2. This means going into our next turn, we then have a rift dice in the dice bag. And at some point, it's going to get drawn out randomly, a bit like an order dice. So let's say we're in our next turn and we pull out a German dice first. We'll activate one of our units. We'll pull out a American dice. That's just what happens to come out next. There we go. Brilliant. And then we give the dice bag a shake. And then we happen to pull out the Rift dice on our third pull. The controlling player of that Rift dice, so in this case, the American player, immediately rolls that dice. That's now the result of that Rift dice for that turn. So that's active. Once you know the result, you then get to assign it to one of your units. You can only assign it to a Rift unit which is currently below its maximum starting Rift dice. So for example, with our Fireflies, they start the game with 1, but right now they have no Rift dice, so they're below their maximum. So what I can do is assign it to that unit. Alrighty ho ho, that covers Rift dice, order dice, and how we start using them with the dice bag. But let's go a little bit deeper. Let's look at movement, shooting, and combat next, and how all of this works with the Rift dice and the order dice. Here we have a basic battlefield scenario. Some Style Trooper and a Vogel Spinner versus the Fireflies and a linebacker. As you can see, each unit has a Rift dice associated with it because it is the start of the game, and each one of these units is a Rift unit. We will start our mock battle simulation by reaching into the dice bag and drawing out a German dice. I'm going to use this to activate my Style Trooper right here. The first order that we are going to show off is going to be the run order. We put our order dice next to our Style Trooper, and then we are able to move up to 12 inches. Each unit has a specific movement value, although many of them are the same. For example, typically something that's marching on foot like this will move 12 inches on a run order. Mechs typically move 24 inches on a run order, and flying units like the Fireflies can move 18 inches on a run order. We get our tape measure out, and that shows us how far our Style Trooper can move, and then we're going to move the Style Trooper straight forward in that direction. After moving forward our 12 inches, our Style Trooper are here. Their Rift dice and their order dice come with them, and they can't do anything else this turn. That is their activation. Next up, we are going to draw out our dice from the dice bag, and it just so happens to be an American dice. I'm going to assign this order dice to the linebacker, and I'm going to give it an advance order. Now, an advance order means it can move and shoot, but it can't move as far as a unit does when it's on a run. When on a run, a unit typically moves its maximum distance. When on an advance order, it can move up to half of that. So for a linebacker, its run, as we said, was 24 inches. When it's an advance, it can go up to 12 inches instead. So once again, we'll get our tape measure out, we'll measure out 12 inches, and then we'll shoot the linebacker. So I chose to move my linebacker about 6 inches forward. I could have moved a bit further, but just for the purpose of this display, I've shown that you can move up to half, but you don't have to move the full distance. Again, how far a unit moves on an advance is covered on the unit's data sheet. So the linebacker, it clearly states up to 12 inches when it's doing an advance order. And I've chosen to go 6 just to show you don't have to go the maximum each time. Now that we have moved our linebacker forward as part of the advance order, we can then do some shooting. Now my linebacker is equipped with a light Tesla cannon, and it is equipped with twin autocannon, and it is equipped with twin MMG. All of these are going to fire into the Vogel Spinner. Each one of these weapon profiles you can find in the back of your Konflikt 47 rulebook. The light autocannon fires 2 shots. Because we have 2 of them, we can fire 4 shots. Each one of these shots is represented by a normal 6-sided dice, with starting with a 1, going all the way up to a 6, with the symbols representing a 6. Every unit in Konflikt 47 starts off with hitting on a 4+. But there are various modifiers that will either increase or decrease that. For example, if you move, then you suffer a -1 to hit modifier, meaning that you would then hit on a 5+ instead, essentially making you a bit less accurate. So with our autocannons, we've got 2 shots per autocannon, so that's 4 shots. we're going to fire those into the Vogel spinner. Normally we'd need 4s if we stayed still, but because we moved, we suffered that -1 to hit modifier, so we're going to need 5s. We roll the dice, and look, I've not got a single hit. All of my autocannon shots go wide, nothing happens to the Vogel spinner. However, you can see that if I had stayed still, I would have got 1 hit. So this shows the advantage of staying still. You are a much more stable firing platform. But of course, if you're not moving, that might mean you're not making it onto objectives and other things that we'll cover at some point in the future. So it's not always the best idea to stay still. Sometimes you need to move forward anyway, but if you do, you are going to incur that very important -1 to hit penalty. Next, we're going to fire our light Tesla cannon. And this is a great way of showing off how Rift dice work. So our light Tesla cannon normally only fires 1 shot, but instead we are going to take our active Rift dice here, turn it to exhausted, and we are going to activate our Tesla cannon's Tesla arc ability. Now all of this is covered in the Konflikt 47 rulebook, both on the weapon profile and in the Rift weapon special rule section. I'll summarize it quickly for you here. A light Tesla cannon goes from firing 1 shot to firing 4 shots if you use an active Rift dice like that. Also, because now we've activated the Tesla arc ability, we get +1 to hit. So we're -1 to hit because we moved, but we're +1 to hit because we're shooting against an enemy vehicle. So to be clear, +1 to hit against enemy vehicles. So now we roll our dice, and oh look, turned out we didn't need that +1 to hit, but we have managed to get 3 hits against that Vogel spinner. Now, before we go any further, we have to assign a pin marker to the Vogel spinner. If you hit an enemy unit with a weapon that can damage that enemy unit, then typically it will receive a pin marker. We'll get to what pin markers do later on in this video, but for now it's important to understand that if you get a hit with a weapon that can damage the enemy unit, then you give them a pin marker. It doesn't matter how many times you hit them with one of your units or one of their units, it's still 1 pin. So to understand this, if I'd hit with my autocannons as well, this wouldn't receive 2 pin markers, it would still only receive 1, because it's 1 unit putting 1 pin on an enemy unit, no matter how many times it hits them. So we've hit the Vogel spinner, we've put a pin on the Vogel spinner, but how do we actually damage it? Well, you have to look at your weapon's penetration modifier. Every weapon will have one. Either it'll be nothing, or it'll be +1, +2, or +3, or maybe even higher. What you do is you roll a d6 dice, and you add the penetration value to that dice, and if you meet or exceed the enemy's damage value, then you are able to hurt them. So for example, with this Vogel spinner, it has a damage value of 8+. Now, if I don't have a penetration modifier, I can't physically hurt that Vogel spinner. Think about it. I've only got a d6-sided dice. I can't roll an 8 on this. But if I have a weapon that is pen +2 or higher, then I have a potential to actually hurt this thing. So let us say our autocannon had hit the Vogel spinner earlier. I know it missed, but just for the sake of this experiment, let's say it had hit. We have our 1 hit. Our autocannon is pen +2. The Vogel spinner is damage value 8+. In order for us to be able to damage the Vogel spinner, we need to roll a 6 on this dice. Now we've rolled a 2, which means that the shot has harmlessly bounced off the Vogel spinner's armor. But what about our Tesla cannon? Well, that works a little bit differently. Now this isn't true for all Rift weapons, but a lot of Rift weapons can actually add their penetration values together to try and make a shot more powerful. So for example, with our Tesla cannon, when we shoot it at an enemy vehicle, not only do we get +1 to hit, but also rather than each one of these being a single pen +1 shot, which is the pen of the light Tesla cannon, which wouldn't be able to physically damage the Vogel spinner, instead we add all of these shots together, so pen +1 added together 3 times is pen plus 3, and then we roll a single dice. So it means that we're more likely to punch through with the Tesla cannon than we are with the autocannon. So this is now a pen plus 3 shot. So now we need a 5 plus. Now, just for the sake of this, let us say that we successfully managed to roll our 5 up. If we do, that means we then get a chance to try and damage the Vogel spinner. Vehicles are damaged very differently to infantry, as we'll see later on in a moment, which is, infantry is much more simple. Vehicles, if you damage them, they don't just instantly die. There's a whole mechanic of rolling on a vehicle damage table, and the higher you roll, the more damage that you do. With typically, if you roll a 6 or higher, then what ends up happening is you destroy the vehicle and it gets knocked out. So vehicles are really interesting because whilst vehicles and infantry have the same mechanic on you have to try and match or beat their damage value, it's possible for vehicles to get damaged multiple times throughout a game but not actually be destroyed. Or it's possible they get damaged once and they get knocked out. For the sake of our experiment, let us say that the linebacker successfully rolls a 6 on that vehicle damage table and the Vogel spinner is knocked out. Because the Vogel spinner has been knocked out before it's had time to activate, we go over to our dice bag, we reach in, we get to actually pick this time, we reach in, we take the Vogel spinner's dice out of the bag, we put it out of the game, and now that unit doesn't get, and we take its drift dice and its pin marker, it's been knocked out, and now that unit isn't getting to do anything. And the linebacker successfully moved forward and destroyed the Vogel spinner. When vehicles are destroyed, they are not removed from the battlefield. Instead, they stay on the board and they essentially become like a terrain piece. And of course, if a vehicle is destroyed, it's always a lot of fun to put a bunch of coloured smoke and fluff on there to really add to the cinematic effect of the game. Now, vehicles are a little complicated when it comes to moving and shooting them in Konflikt 47. Let's take a look at infantry now, and you'll see this is much more straightforward. Our next dice this turn is going to be the Fireflies, and they are just going to go for a straightforward fire order. Now, because they have gone for that fire order, they do not move, and instead they just shoot at the Style Trooper straight away. They don't move or anything, they just stay there and they shoot them. Now, you'll notice that these units are very, very close together. When you do a fire order, you hit on a 4+. When you are shooting a unit that you are within point blank range of, aka you are within 6 inches of them, so you get your tape measure out and you measure, is every model within 6 inches? Yes. You get a +2 to hit modifier. So these Fireflies would normally hit on a 4+, but because they're so point blank to the Style Trooper, they're actually going to hit on a 2+. Now, each one of these Fireflies gets to shoot with its maximum number of shots. For each one equipped with these M1X Thompsons, they're going to get 2 shots. And we also get a guy here who's got an automatic rifle, and he's also going to fire 2 shots. But there's no point in rolling his dice. Why? Because his weapon does not have a pen modifier. It's just 2 shots. It's just a basic, it's a BAR. It's been trucking since nearly World War I. So it doesn't get any penetration modifier. Because these Style Trooper are damage value 7+, even if this guy rolls a 6, he can't meet or exceed their damage value, so he can't hurt us. But these guys can hurt the Style Trooper because they have got pen +1 on those M1X Thompsons. So we get 2 shots per guy. So that is going to be a total of 10 shots for that unit. So we have our 10 shots here. We're in point blank. So normally we'd be hitting on 4s, but now we're hitting on 2s. We take out any misses. So we'll take out the 1s. Now we have a pen modifier of +1. So in order for us to hurt these Style Trooper, we are going to need to roll some 6s. So we take away all the dice which aren't 6s because this is 6 + 1 = 7. The damage value of these Style Trooper is 7, so they now die. So there's no armor saves or anything like that in this game. How it works is if you meet or exceed the damage value of an infantry model, it is just knocked out. What the armor does is increase their damage value. So a Firefly doesn't have any kind of power armor, so it has a damage value of 5+, which means it can be wounded by anything in the game, even weapons which don't have a penetration modifier. But the Style Trooper, because they're wearing very, very heavy power armor, they don't get an armor save, they just essentially become immune to small arms by going up to damage value 7+. And of course, don't forget that once we've removed the casualties, he has been hit by weapons that can hurt him, so he gets a pin marker. Now, this Style Trooping squad has taken some pretty heavy casualties. If a unit loses half or more of its guys in one go, so from one enemy activation, then they are forced to take a morale test. How the morale test works is you have to roll under your leadership value, under your morale value on 2 dice. So our Style Trooper, on their data sheet, on their unit entry, it says they have a morale value of 10. So I need to roll 10 or less on these 2 dice, except there are modifiers. This is where our pins come in. For every pin marker that you have, your unit is -1 morale. So now I have to actually roll 9 or under for that remaining Style Trooper. I've successfully managed to roll a 3, so he does not run away. If I had rolled 10 or higher, then he actually would have run away. And how running away in this game works is the unit is destroyed. Even if there was quite a few left in there, if you fail morale tech, your unit panics and essentially flees off the board. But we passed, so we're okay. So at the end of our first turn of our mock battlefield scenario, things are going very well for the Americans. They've managed to knock out the Vogel Spinner, and the Style Trooper are looking a lot worse for wear. Every unit has now activated. They've got their order dice next to them, so that is the end of turn 1. What we would do is at the end of the turn, we've got 1 exhausted rift dice here with the linebacker, so we'd roll it. That's exhausted, so that's going to go back in the dice bag, and then we take all of the order dice and that exhausted rift dice, put them in the dice bag, and we're ready to go for turn 2. So going into turn 2, we get our dice bag, we give it a good shake, we reach in, and oh look, we've happened to pull out the German dice first. Now we are going to give our Style Trooper a run order again, but this time we're not going to use it to run forward, we're going to use it to run into combat. Remember what I said? Run orders both are used for regular movement, but also for instigating charges. But we may not do our order. We may actually fail it. Why? Because we have a pin marker. Any unit that has pin markers on it must do what is called an order test to see if it will do as it is told when an order dice is assigned to it. Similar to the morale check, you have to roll on your leadership, your morale value, or lower, taking into account pin markers, with each pin giving you a -1. So our Style Trooper are morale value 10. They've got 1 pin, so their morale value 9. I need to roll a 9 or less on 2 dice in order to effectively carry out my order. Now we've done a 5, so that means we do get to run into combat, but if we had rolled a 10 or higher, then what would have happened is instead of doing a run, our guy would have involuntarily gone down for the turn, and that would not have been a good thing. This shows the potency of pins, because you can start messing with your opponent's plans and having their units disobey their commands. And it is possible to fail your order test in a spectacular fashion. Any unit which fails an order test on a double 6 does a foobar. There is a whole table for what foobar is, and essentially you roll a d6 and you consult the table. Maybe your units will panic and run away. Maybe there will be friendly fire. However, in this case, our Style Trooper did as he was told and he passed his order check. Now because he has passed an order, he gets to remove 1 pin marker. He only has 1 pin marker, so he gets to remove that one. If he had 2 pin markers, then he would remove just 1 of them and he would still have 1 left over. But he's only got 1, so we'll take that away. And then because we gave him that run order and he successfully carried it out, he gets to run into combat. When executing a normal movement-based run order, you can move your style troop and you can move your models however you want. When doing a charge, you have to go straight forward via the most direct route possible. You cannot choose to try and go round terrain or anything like that. Your guys are charging forward. They have to go straight forward, closest, most direct route possible. In Konflikt 47, there is no need to consolidate or pile your models in to see how many get to fight. When a unit makes it into combat, both sides get to attack with everybody, regardless of where their position might be. Just represents the swirling melee of combat. So even if you only get one guy in, everyone gets to fight. So these guys on the edges are still going to get to fight in this combat. But who fights first? Well, if you are fighting on open ground like this, then both sides fight at the same time, simultaneously. However, if the fireflies are behind some cover, be that a hedge or trees or even a hill, if they are in a defended position, then they would actually get to strike first. So attacking in Konflikt 47 in Assault is actually quite dangerous, because it means sometimes your opponent would actually get to strike before you. The defenders sometimes get to strike before the attackers. However, there are a whole bunch of units which get to mitigate cover on the charge. Big, fast and strong ones like Schreckwolfen and Ursus Bear Infantry are great for charging through terrain and battering people on the other side. But in this case, we're on open ground, so everyone gets to fight at the same time. Now our Style Trooper has got 2 attacks. He has 1 base and he has 1 because he is equipped with an assault weapon. This STG-44Z gives him assault. Assault gives you tough fighter. That gives you an extra attack. If you are not equipped with assault weapons, do not have tough fighter naturally, and do not have any kind of deadly special rule, then every person just gets 1 attack. But in this case, with our Style Trooper, he gets 1 attack plus 1 for being equipped with an assault weapon. In combat, you do not roll to hit like you do with shooting. You see, with this guy, we had to roll to hit, then roll to damage. In combat, everyone hits automatically. You just roll to damage. And with infantry combat like this, you essentially just roll to kill. I've been lucky there. I've failed with 1 because these guys have got a damage value of 5 up. But I've passed with 1, so I successfully kill 1 Firefly. But don't worry, he does still get to attack, because remember, attacking on open ground like this, everyone fights at the same time. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Fireflies here, which are equipped with those Tesla Thompsons. Now, they have assault, which means they get an extra attack per guy. And also, and this is really cool, so what makes Fireflies really powerful, if you have an assault weapon, then you can use the shooting penetration modifier in combat as well. So what that means is that normally these guys, like this chap down here, he doesn't have a Tesla Thompson, so he can only roll a 6 to damage the Style Trooper, which means he basically can't hurt him. So this guy would be immune. But, I mean, there is a little bit more to it than that, but we're keeping it simple for today, okay? But because these guys have got Pen +1 on their shooting weapons, they can use that also, because they're assault weapons, it means they actually get Pen +1 in combat as well. Which means out of all of these dice, we need 1 6 to kill this Style Trooper. We've got 2 6s, so he's very, very dead. So that Style Trooper would go away. This Firefly would go away. And the remaining Fireflies would have successfully won that combat. But let us imagine for a moment that the Fireflies didn't kill the Style Trooper. He runs in, kills 1, they do their attacks, and let's say, hypothetically, they rolled no 6s. The Style Trooper is still alive. He has done more casualties to the Fireflies than he has received. If he had a big squad, let's say they'd done 1 casualty, they'd receive none. Whichever side inflicts the most casualties in a combat wins that combat. The loser of a combat is wiped out. So if these Fireflies had failed to roll a 6, even though there's only one Style Trooper and there are 5 of them, they would get completely wiped out. Close quarters combat is very, very brutal in Konflikt 47. Alright, so that covers the basics of moving, shooting and combat. But before we get into terrain and explaining a bit more about down and rally orders, I do want to go on a quick side note here, movement. In other tabletop games like Warhammer 40k, units can generally move however they want. In bolt action, things are a little different. Your infantry can move in whatever direction they want. They can go forwards, backwards, left, right, whatever, spinning in circles, whatever you want. Infantry, very fluid movement. Vehicles, on the other hand, do actually have a bit more going on. Vehicles tend to move in straight lines with pivots which allow them to change direction, but they have a limit on the number of pivots that they can do. For example, a tracked vehicle like this Panther can typically move, do one pivot, and then move a bit further. It can't just go from here and then sort of go diagonally across to here. You have to move in straight lines with pivots. Kind of realistically. Walkers are pretty similar. They essentially operate in the same way as vehicles. They have facings and you move them a bit, pivot, and then continue your move. Multi-legged walkers like this Spinner tend to be a bit faster on things like going forward and backwards. They're very nimble, but two-legged walkers like this Linebacker tend to get more pivots. We won't get into the deep dive on vehicle movement right now. I want to keep this beginner friendly and very high level, but it's very important that you check the Konflikt 47 rulebook for the nitty-gritty detail on how vehicles move and how that is different to how infantry moves. But let us now continue with our demonstration of the different orders, and we'll also at the same time talk a bit about terrain. One of the orders that we touched upon before was the down order and how it can be an involuntary thing that your units do when they're coming under heavy fire. Down orders are something you can also choose to do to try and protect one of your units. Let's take the following scenario. We've got a linebacker that is taking on these German units. The linebacker goes to do a fire order and it goes to shoot its weapons at the Style Trooper over here. These Style Trooper have not got an order dice next to them yet. Because they have not yet been assigned an order, you can choose to go down. When you choose to go down, it's one of the other limited times when you actually get to reach into the dice bag and pick out a order of your choice. Pick out a dice of your choice rather than it being random. In this case, if we choose to go down with our Style Trooper, it essentially represents them hitting the dirt, getting behind the cover. Now, if you are out in the open, so let's say this hedge doesn't exist, then you get a 5+ cover save for going down out in the open. If you are already behind cover, then you get +2 to your cover save. Now, there are essentially two kinds of cover save in Konflikt 47. You have got soft cover and you've got hard cover. Soft cover gives your unit a 5+ cover save. Hard cover gives your unit a 4+ cover save. If you go down behind soft cover, that will be improved to a 3+. If you go down behind hard cover, that will be improved to a 2+. A 2+ cover save is obviously a very good thing. Cover saves essentially allow you to mitigate damage. So let's say, for example, that our linebacker here has unleashed its autocannons and whatnot onto these Style Trooper and it has managed to get 2 wounds against them. Now, if they were out in the open and they weren't down, then that would just be 2 killed. As we saw before, you just have to meet or exceed the damage value. But if they were down, out in the open, before you remove any casualties, you get to see if the cover protects them. You roll a dice for each wound that has been done on the unit, each damage that's been done on the unit, and as long as you get a 5+ on each one of these dice, then you will start mitigating that damage. So let's say we've got 2 wounds here, we're looking for some 5-ups. So we didn't pass any of those, so we would still lose those 2 guys. But let's say that one of these was a 5, then it would mean, okay, we've got 1 3, so we've not made our cover save, 1 5, so we have made 1, so rather than losing 2 guys, we just lose 1. If we were behind cover in this scenario and we had rolled this and we had gone down, then actually we would take no casualties. But we've still been hit by the enemy unit, so we would still take a pin. Even if you pass all of your cover saves, if you've been hit, you still take the pin. Knowing when to stay up and knowing when to issue a down order is a very important skill to have as a Konflikt 47 player. Sometimes a unit surviving is more important than a unit trying to activate later in the turn. Mitigating casualties can mean that you have more resources available on the board longer in the game. But of course, sometimes hitting the dirt is not what you want to do. Maybe you can't afford to have that unit out for the turn, because once it's gone down, it's had its order assigned to it. It can't do anything else that turn. This counts as your order. So you've got to choose. Do you go down and do you try and keep your unit around? Or do you stay up, take it on the chin, but maybe you start taking casualties and your unit starts becoming less effective anyway? But what about vehicles? Well, they can benefit from cover as well. As long as your vehicle is significantly obscured by the terrain, it's well hidden behind it, then you can get a cover save. So for example, if this Tesla can had popped off and was going to potentially damage this Vogel spinner, we could actually roll a 5-up save because of the intervening cover, and if we get it off, then it would stop that damage going through. Of course, if we roll a 2, we haven't made our 5-up for soft cover, so the damage would still go through. It's important to note that walkers can also go down. You can issue a down order to walkers, but they don't get +2 to be in cover. They get +1. Represents some sort of hunching down a little bit, but it's a lot harder for a walker to sort of hit the dirt, as it were. It just sort of makes a slightly smaller profile, which gives it a slightly better cover save. And yes, if it is out in the open, like here, then you would get that 6-up. Tracked vehicles, like this, traditional vehicles, cannot go down. They do not gain any benefit from it. You've got to think about it. I mean, how this isn't lowering its profile or anything. So tracked vehicles are not as good at sort of hiding in cover. They can benefit from cover, but they can't go down in the cover. So that covers the down order, but let's take a quick look at the rally order now. This is actually one of the simplest orders to get your head around. Essentially, it's the way of being able to remove pins other than passing order checks. So as we saw earlier in the video, if you pass an order check, you lose 1 pin. But what happens if you've got loads of pins? Well, this is where rally can come into the fight. Consider this scenario in front of us. The Americans have had a bit of a blitz and they've managed to put 3 units into the Style Trooper. Somehow the Style Trooper have managed to survive, but because they've been hit by 3 enemy units, they now have 3 pin markers on them. To try and get the Style Trooper unit to do an order like advance or maybe fire would be kind of risky. They've got 3 pins, so their leadership is now -3. So they are going to have to roll a 7 or lower on 2 dice to try and do what we tell them. Now, that's probably a little bit risky. And considering that all of the American forces have been, rather than going for an order test which they might fail, instead we'll go for a rally test. So we take an order dice, but when we draw our order dice out of the bags, this is not like down where you pick it out, it's one where it's drawn out as per the randomized system. You draw it out of the bag and you choose to give them a rally. Rallies still require you to take an order test, but you ignore any modifiers, including from pins. So you're like, okay, normally to do an order test, this would be morale value 10, -3, 7. Because I'm doing a rally, I can now ignore these pins, so now I need to pass a 10 on 2 dice. We've now passed that, so all of those pins go away. Not 1 pin because we've passed an order test, 1 pin I should say, but because you passed a rally, you lose all of your pins. So if you've got a unit with like 7 or 8 pins on it, and it's getting really, really close to just being completely pinned up, then a cheeky rally order can get your unit back in the game. And hey, it may not mean it's doing anything this turn, but next turn it's back in, and that might be its time to shine. Konflikt 47. As we've seen with the down order and as we've seen with the rally order, it's not just about thinking about this turn, it's about thinking about the next turn as well. The last order of the day is ambush. This is the one that, when used properly, can be very, very powerful. Consider the scenario in front of us. We have got the Stahltrooper and the Vogelspinner already activated, and we have got the Bruin and the Fireflies already activated here. There are 2 units that have not yet been. We've got the Axis Panther and we've got the US Linebacker. Now let's say we're drawing our dice out of the bag and the next one that comes out is an Axis one. I could simply go for a fire order on this Panther and attempt to take out the Bruin. But I am aware that there's a linebacker that's hiding behind this forest. Now I can't see through the forest. Forests do block line of sight. So if I go for the fire order over here, it means that the linebacker has an opportunity to jump out and get me, which is not good. I don't want to lose my valuable Panther. So instead of going for a fire order, what I do is I go for an ambush order. My unit does not fire. It waits for an opportune moment from an enemy unit to move into line of sight, and then it gets to fire. It essentially gets to interrupt the opponent's movement sequence. So let's say we draw our next dice out of the bag, and it happens to be an American one. And the American player said, you know what, I'm going to come in here and help start finishing off these Axis forces. So we're going to go for an advance. He does his pivot. He brings the linebacker over to here, but before he gets to do his next pivot, bringing his front armor onto bear, I, as the Axis player, am able to go, hang on, I am going to trigger my ambush. When you trigger the ambush, the opponent stops moving where they are temporarily, and then you get to do a fire order. You change the ambush dice to a fire dice. You then get to fire at that unit normally, and yes, that does mean you can expend rift dice and all that kind of stuff. If you successfully destroy the enemy unit, then that's great. If you don't destroy the enemy unit, then they get to continue with their movement. The reason why ambush is so powerful is it's because you can actually really throw a spanner in the works to your opponent's plans. Let's see if we can do something to this linebacker. So we had an active rift dice. We are going to use our active rift dice to use the rail cannon's hypervelocity shot. This now means that we hit the linebacker on a 2+. We've now hit the linebacker. So we've hit it, so it's going to take a pin, at least. Now, even if we don't damage it, that's already big. Because another to hit modifier in this game is, do you have any pins? So remember before when we saw the linebacker move and shoot, it didn't have any pins, it hit on 5s, because it normally hits on 4s, it moved, so now it hits on 5s. Now it's moved and it has at least 1 pin, so that's another -1 modifier, so that means it would be hitting on 6s. So even if we don't destroy this thing, we've already significantly hampered its capability to do any damage. But you don't stop just because you put a pin on it. You keep going through the full attack sequence. So we've got the hit. Now let's see if we can damage it. We've got a 4. The rail cannon, when fired with an active rift dice, hypervelocity, is penetration +9. With +4, that actually means we've got 13. On the side armor of a mech, you get another +1. I told you hitting things on the side is really good. So that's actually a result of 14 in total. 14 versus this thing's damage value of 9 up. That means we have got a penetrating hit. Now, if you penetrate an enemy vehicle, you don't just match its damage value, but you actually exceed it, then you get a much better chance of destroying it. If you get a result where your overall dice roll, in our case it was 14, is at least 3 higher than the enemy unit's damage value, so in this case that would have been 12, so we have done that, then you get what's called massive damage, and you get to roll 2 dice on that vehicle damage table. Now, to knock an enemy vehicle out, there's all sorts of things, but when you are on a penetrating hit, massive damage, you get 2 dice, and you want to try and get a 4 up on either one. If you manage that, you destroy the enemy unit. So we've done that, we've got a 4 right there, so that linebacker is now destroyed. And that is the power of ambush. This linebacker thought it was going to come in here, it was going to start getting all up on our business, wiping our units out, but instead, because we had a really good anti-tank unit with an active rift dice on ambush, ready to rock and roll, it's completely shut down that maneuver. Don't get me wrong, not every ambush is going to be that effective. Some will simply be the case of killing an infantryman or 2 and putting a pin on there. But it goes to show the potential power of ambush. My opponent thought that he was going to get me, but actually I've managed to get him. And whether you just put a pin on them and you start messing up their ability to hit, or whether you actually knock them out, ambush orders are one that are often overlooked, but they can be very important. Now you might be thinking, okay, but if I put this guy on ambush and my opponent doesn't move the linebacker out, does that mean that I've wasted this guy's order for a turn? Well, tactically, possibly not. Just being able to control your opponent's movement is actually quite big, but also specifically not at all, because there's a special thing about ambush orders. You don't need to put them back in the dice bag at the end of the turn. So let's say that the linebacker guy here, he decides, you know what, he's not going to risk it. He's just going to go for maybe, like an advance order to here. And he's just going to move up to that forest. Okay, he's not really doing very much, just a little bit of extra movement. At the end of the turn, we would pick up these order dice here. We'd get our exhausted rift dice, and well, that one's going to go back in the bag, and we're going to do this one, and that one's going back in the bag. Okay, we get all of those dice, and we put them back in the bag, but we don't have to put the ambush one back in the bag. This unit can stay on ambush, which means going into the next turn, it's already got its order sorted out, which is massive, because it now means that when it comes to the Americans deciding what to do with all of these units, that ambush is ready to rock and cock. On a similar note, you can actually also choose to stay down with an enemy unit. The reason you might do that is because if, let's say, instead of doing a rally here, we'd gone down, right? And we picked up those 3 pins from all this firepower. If you choose to stay down, then yes, it means that unit isn't doing anything going into the next turn. But if you choose to stay down from one turn to the next, you basically lose all your pin markers. So it's almost like a free rally in a funny sort of way. So the ambush orders and down orders are very interesting, because they are the only orders which actually get to stay out of the bag from one turn to the next. Now you don't, to be clear, you don't have to keep them out there. You can shoot, you go, you know what, that ambush has done its job, just controlling that movement over there, back in the bag you go. You know what, I don't want to stay down here, and these guys need to be doing something, it can go back in the bag. So it's a choice. You can choose to stay down from turn to turn and, start losing pins. And you can choose to stay on ambush from turn to turn. But you know what? I think that just about covers everything for today. And I really do hope this video has been helpful. I know that there's been a few bits we've glossed over, like the vehicle damage table and stuff like that. But the aim with this video was to just give you guys an idea, to point you in the right direction, and to help you start getting familiar and getting to grips with how some of the core mechanics of Konflikt 47 work. But please let me know down in the comment section what you think. Was this video helpful? Do you have any questions? And what would you like to see in the future? If you did enjoy today's video and you did find it helpful, then please consider going ahead and liking it. It's a really big help with the YouTube algorithm. And if you want to see more content like this, both beginner guides and advanced tactics and battle reports for Konflikt 47, then please make sure you subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Redfield, 32, Jurgens, Miasma, Try Again, Bragg, RJ, Scorpion, Bonbon Vert, Lord Pryor, Nicholas Walsh, John Stubbs, Guardian, Varney, Sword, Fish Trombone, Pickalock the Forged. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.